Hi guys, this is security. I would like to give a demonstration on Spring Security implementation with JSF. Um, uh, this is my email address, bumsecurity@gmail.com. If you have any questions, you can actually send an email to this email address or put some comments on this video. Okay, let us look into the Spring Security implementation on a simple web project that has JSF capabilities. Let's do escape and my Eclipse. I just created a project called JSF R&D here. It's a simple web project. It has a couple of files here: admin.xhtml, user.xhtml. So in this demo, what I'm trying to do is admin.xhtml is only restricted for admin users, whereas user is restricted to user. So there are two roles here. One is admin role, another is the user role. Admin can access both admin as well as user pages, but the user can only access user pages, and this is what the typical situation in most of the web applications. So we're going to use Spring Security here to implement this functionality. Now let's look into the configurations, what we have done for integrating Spring with the web project. The first, I would like to go with web.xml or app context.xml. This is application context. It's a Spring configuration file, and you have your namespaces and etc. here, pointing to Spring 3.0, most of the thing. So this is basically a Spring tag, Spring component scan. This allows us to scan the Spring components on the following packages. com.bm fusion is the current package, and org.spring.security is the Spring framework package. A resources security, basically the HTTP tag allows us to define your resources security. So in this case, I'm using a form based login, that is /login.jsp JSF, and intercept URL /admin will be intercepted, and it will be accessed by only admin users, I mean the role who has admin. The same applied for /pages, can be accessed by both user /admin user. So in case of logout, I declared here to go back to the welcome page and invalidate the session. Business login method security, we're going to look into that later, but initially we're going to concentrate most on the a web page security. The authentication manager, where you can define your own authentication managers. You can actually define a custom authentication manager. Right now we're going to use a simple authentication here. Authentication manager, authentication provider can be an external provider, but now we are actually configuring your authentication in the XML itself. But in the next sessions, we're going to look into integrating this authentication with some external database, etc., and or an external calling an external service for authentication. Here I have defined two users. One is admin user as well as just an user, and here the passwords are not encrypted, but we're going to look into that encryption mechanism in the coming sessions. So I defined the authorities, nothing but the roles. So the admin user has authority admin, the user has authority user. That's it. And you don't have to bother about this logger listener configurations, but we're going to look into that. Now the next thing we're going to look into is web.xml configurations in WebML. So these are just a typical web.xml configuration. So we have context params. I have defined context config location parameter that actually parameter value to Spring application context.xml. This is a Spring configuration file. And the second configuration is related to JSF. The default suffix for JSF pages is XHTML. And the third one is for logging, and we're not going to look into that in this session. The very important thing is the listener. We're going to define a listener here for Spring, that is this context loader listener. I'm sorry, we're going to do yes, right, context loader listener. And the next one is the filter. The filter is the delegation filter proxy, and we're going to intercept all the requests to go through this filter. That's it, and the rest of the configuration are related to JSF. And you guys know, if you are not familiar with JSF, and maybe I will do one more session on JSF, and you can actually look into that session, but this configuration is related to JSF basically. So I'm going to access any kind of URLs here. Either my URL can be either .jsf or .xhtml. Here is the welcome page, a standard way of configuring the welcome page. That's it on the web.xml. It just looks like a plain web.xml. There is nothing much new in it. The only thing is to configure Spring related context params, listeners, and the filters. That's it. Now coming back to the config faces config.xml, the more interesting thing is the navigation rules here. This is how our navigation rules are. We have a welcome page, we have an admin page, and user page, and access denied page. And we're not showing any login form here because that will be intercepted by the Spring. Even the admin denied page also be intercepted. We're going to delete it, but we don't need it actually, but I just do a different way of configuration here. That's the reason I put admin denied page, because I have used a home link that actually redirect my request to welcome.xml. Okay, and now look into the project web.xml directory structure. We have a pages folder, which is a secured folder, only be accessed by either which has roles user or admin. The admin folder has a restriction. All the resources in this folder can be accessed by only the user who has admin role. And that's it. Now let us start this in the debug mode and see how it works. So finish. I'm using Tomcat 7 and with Spring. You sort of debug messages here because I set my login to debug just to make my development easier, and see how Spring Security Framework behavior of the Spring Security Framework. That's the reason I set up my login properties to debug. So here is the welcome page. On this page it's asking who are you. You can be either admin or an user. So let's try with an admin. So I'm the admin user. So when I do login, username cannot be null and the password cannot be empty. This is a standard JSF page with some validations. Now if you look into that login.xhtml, this is simple standard XHTML. It has a form, login form, and it has two input where ID is a user. Keep in mind here it's not J username, it's just a username. For example, if you are familiar with Java authentication authorization on a web application, normally you have to define your login form with